Airports are filled with strangers passing by, each carrying their own secrets, their own stories. But sometimes, a single flight can change everything. This is the story of two women, both flight attendants, who discovered that passion doesn't always wait for the right moment or the right place. It ignites in the skies, where rules are strict but hearts can't be controlled. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss the emotional and provocative stories we bring here, tales of forbidden love, unexpected passion, and the courage it takes to follow your heart. That night, above the clouds, we learned that desire can take off when you least expect it. The hum of the aircraft was a sound I had grown used to, almost like a second heartbeat. After years of working as a flight attendant, the rhythm of takeoffs, the shuffling of passengers, and the polite but practiced smiles had all become routine. That night, however, nothing felt ordinary. From the moment I saw her, standing at the galley with her hair perfectly pinned back, her navy uniform fitting her like it was designed only for her, I felt a crack in the routine I'd built to keep myself safe. Her name was Claire. I learned it when the chief attendant introduced us before boarding began, her voice calm and professional, her handshake firm but warm. "It's a pleasure to work with you tonight," she said, and I swore her eyes lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. I told myself it was nothing. Just two professionals meeting before a long-haul overnight flight. But every time I caught her moving through the cabin, the way she leaned slightly toward passengers when she spoke, the way her laughter softened even the most impatient traveler, I found myself pulled into her orbit. The night stretched on as we served drinks, handled requests, and soothed frustrations. Somewhere over the Atlantic, while the cabin lights were dimmed and most of the passengers drifted into uneasy sleep, Claire and I ended up together in the small rear galley. The world outside was nothing but black sky and stars, and inside, the hum of the engines seemed to amplify the silence between us. She leaned against the counter, sipping from her water bottle, her eyes catching mine. "You've been quiet tonight," she said softly, her tone not accusatory but curious. I shrugged, pretending to check the inventory sheet in my hands. "Just tired, I guess." But she tilted her head, studying me with that unnerving attentiveness. "No, it's something else. You seem distracted." The truth sat heavy on my tongue, and for a moment I thought about confessing. Telling her that the reason I'd fumbled a passenger's order, the reason I'd avoided her gaze, was because she unsettled me in a way no one had in years. But I swallowed it back, offering only a small smile. "Maybe it's just the turbulence." Her lips curved upward. Funny. I didn't feel any turbulence. The air between us thickened. I busied myself by checking the coffee machine, but when I turned back, she was still watching me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, quite the opposite. It was like she was trying to read me, peeling back the layers I'd carefully built around my heart. We were interrupted by the call light dinging from row 14. I exhaled, almost relieved, and she brushed past me to respond. Her shoulder brushed mine, a brief contact that sent a jolt through me. I stood frozen for a moment, my pulse quickening as though I'd been caught doing something forbidden. Hours later, when the plane settled into the calm of night and the cabin was silent, I found myself drifting back to the galley. Claire was there again, her hair slightly looser now, a strand falling against her cheek. She looked less like the perfect attendant and more like a woman caught in the strange intimacy of midnight above the clouds. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice gentle. I shook my head. "Never could on flights. Too many thoughts." She nodded, her eyes softening. "I get that. Sometimes it feels like up here, above everything, the thoughts you've been avoiding finally catch up to you." Her words struck something deep inside me. I wanted to ask her what thoughts haunted her, what truths she kept tucked away behind her easy smile. But instead I admitted, that's exactly it. We stood in silence for a while, the kind that wasn't awkward but charged. My hand brushed against the counter beside hers, and though we weren't touching, the closeness felt almost unbearable. Then, a bit too suddenly, she asked, "Do you live with someone?" The question startled me. "No," I said a little too quickly. "Just me." She nodded, as if that answered a question she hadn't dared to voice. Her eyes flickered to my lips for the briefest moment before darting away. Before I could process it, the intercom crackled, reminding us to prepare for cabin checks. The spell broke. We straightened, slipping back into our roles, but something had shifted. The rest of the night, every time I walked down the aisle, I could feel her presence like a current pulling me closer. Every smile we exchanged felt like a secret, every touch of our hands when passing trays felt like a spark. By the time we landed in Paris at dawn, I was exhausted, but not from the flight. It was from holding back everything I wanted to say. As we wheeled our suitcases through the quiet airport, she walked beside me, her voice low enough for only me to hear. "Some turbulence," she said with a hint of a smile. I stopped, caught between laughter and breathlessness, but before I could answer, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with a question burning in my chest. Was she teasing me, or was she inviting me to follow where this unexpected flight of the heart could lead? The morning air in Paris carried that mix of fuel, coffee, and rain that clings to airports. After 12 hours in the sky, my body ached, but my mind was sharper than ever. Claire walked just ahead of me, her suitcase gliding effortlessly across the polished floor, her posture graceful despite the fatigue that weighed on the rest of us. I caught myself staring, the fluorescent lights reflecting in her hair, and quickly looked away. Our crew shuffled toward the hotel shuttle, and I told myself to focus. It was just a layover. A bed, a shower, a few hours of sleep, and then back to the air. But when Claire slid into the seat beside me on the bus, her perfume subtle and warm, my heart raced like we were still at 30,000 feet. "You've been quiet," she said softly, her tone almost teasing. I smiled faintly, staring out the window at the gray Parisian morning. I usually am after long flights. It's how I reset. She tilted her head, studying me again in that way that made me feel both exposed and seen. Resetting is good. But sometimes you need more than that. Sometimes you need connection. Her choice of words made my stomach flutter. Connection. Was she talking about the layover? The crew? Or was it something deeper? I wanted to ask, but before I could, the bus pulled up to the hotel. The crew scattered into the lobby, all of us eager for rest. Claire and I ended up with rooms next to each other on the same floor. I fumbled with my key card, and she smiled as she opened her door. "See you in a few hours?" she asked. "For what?" I replied almost too quickly. She shrugged casually, though her eyes lingered on mine. "Maybe coffee. Maybe a walk. We're in Paris after all." I nodded, pretending I wasn't already imagining what that might feel like. "Sure. A walk sounds good." Inside my room, I collapsed onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. What was happening to me? I'd worked alongside dozens of colleagues before, shared layovers, dinners, conversations. But none of them had unsettled me like Claire. None of them made me feel like I was one wrong word away from revealing everything I'd kept locked inside. When I woke hours later, the city had transformed. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a sweater, and when I stepped into the hallway, Claire was waiting, leaning casually against the wall. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose now, and the sight of her stole the breath from my chest. "Ready?" she asked, her smile soft but charged with something more. We walked through the streets of Paris, the air cool, the city alive with the hum of conversation and the glow of cafe lights. Every step beside her felt like stepping deeper into a secret I wasn't sure I was ready to confess. At a cafe near the Seine, we sat outside, sipping espresso as the river reflected the city lights. Conversation flowed easily, stories of passengers we'd never forget, the exhaustion of constant travel, dreams we'd left behind on the ground. And then, in a pause between sips, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why do you look at me like that?" My chest tightened. "Like what?" She leaned forward, her eyes holding mine. "Like you're trying not to." Heat rushed to my cheeks. I looked away, fumbling for words, but none came. She reached across the table, brushing her fingers lightly against mine. "You don't have to pretend with me," she said softly. The touch was fleeting, but it ignited something inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to meet her gaze fully, to let her see the truth in my eyes. We walked again after, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. On a quiet bridge, she stopped, resting her hands on the railing as she looked out over the river. The wind carried her hair across her face, and she turned to me with a look that nearly undid me. "Do you know what I felt up there?" she asked, her voice barely above the hum of the city. "What?" "In the galley, last night. When you avoided my eyes. When your hand brushed mine." She paused, searching my face. "I felt the same thing you did. The turbulence." My breath caught. I wanted to move closer, to close the space between us, but fear rooted me in place. What if I misread everything? What if I destroyed whatever fragile connection we had? Claire must have sensed my hesitation, because she smiled faintly, stepping back. "It's okay," she said gently. "We don't have to name it." "Not yet." We returned to the hotel in silence, the tension between us almost unbearable. At our doors, she paused, her hand resting lightly on the handle. "Good night," she said, her voice steady but her eyes lingering on mine. "Good night," I whispered back. Inside my room, I leaned against the door, my chest heaving. I'd never felt so close to falling and so terrified of the ground below. And as I lay in bed, staring at the city lights bleeding through the curtains, one question burned in my mind. If she felt the same turbulence I did, how long could we keep pretending we were just colleagues passing through the night skies together? The next leg of our journey took us from Paris to New York. I tried to steady my mind as I walked through the crowded terminal, but the weight of what had passed between Claire and me the night before pressed against my thoughts like a constant hum. Every glance at her felt like a reminder of what we'd left unspoken, and every step beside her was charged with the possibility of crossing an invisible line. On board, the plane buzzed with the usual pre-departure chaos. Passengers stuffing bags into overhead bins, parents juggling restless children, the metallic click of seatbelts fastening in sequence. Claire and I moved seamlessly through the motions, offering greetings, helping lift bags, giving instructions with practiced smiles. But beneath my professional exterior, my heart pounded each time our hands brushed over a tray table or our eyes locked across the aisle. Mid-flight, as the cabin lights dimmed and most passengers settled into the lull of long-haul travel, Claire joined me in the galley. She leaned casually against the counter, the dim glow casting shadows over her features. For a moment, I tried to focus on refilling water bottles, but the air between us was too thick to ignore. "You didn't sleep much last night, did you?" she asked quietly, her tone light but probing. I shook my head, sliding the bottle back into place. "Too much on my mind." Her lips curved into a small smile. "Same." I froze, unsure of how to respond, and she closed the gap slightly, lowering her voice. "Do you know what I keep thinking about? The bridge. Paris. The way you looked at me when I told you I felt it too." Her words made my pulse race. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "And what are we supposed to do with that?" She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Maybe we stop pretending we don't feel it." Before I could reply, the intercom crackled with the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The plane jolted suddenly, sending a coffee cup sliding across the counter. Claire grabbed my arm instinctively, steadying herself, and for a split second, the feel of her hand on my skin drowned out the chaos around us. Then the cabin shook harder, and we hurried back down the aisle, helping passengers secure themselves, our professionalism snapping back into place even as my mind reeled. When the turbulence finally subsided, I found myself back in the galley, catching my breath. Claire joined me moments later, her hair slightly tousled, her eyes sparkling with adrenaline. She leaned closer, her voice low. "See? Even the sky knows we can't keep this steady forever." I laughed softly, though it came out shaky. "You're impossible. And you're scared," she replied, not unkindly. I didn't deny it. Instead, I busied myself with the snack cart, though my hands trembled slightly as I arranged the small bags of pretzels. She watched me silently for a moment, then reached over, covering my hand with hers. The touch was deliberate this time, not accidental. Warmth spread through me, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. Hours later, as the cabin slept, Claire and I found ourselves seated side by side in the jump seat near the back. The hum of the engines surrounded us, the dim glow of the emergency lights casting long shadows across the cabin. It felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us. She shifted slightly toward me, her knee brushing mine. "You've built walls," she said softly, her gaze steady. "But I see past them." My throat tightened. "And what do you see?" Her eyes softened. "Someone who wants more than she's willing to admit. Someone who's afraid to want it." Her honesty disarmed me. I turned my face away, staring at the faint outline of sleeping passengers. "It's not that simple, Claire. We work together. We travel constantly. It's complicated." She leaned closer, her voice low but firm. "Life is always complicated. But connection? That's rare. You don't throw that away because it's inconvenient." Her words lodged deep inside me. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I could ignore what I felt, but the truth was written all over me. The warmth in my chest when she smiled, the electricity when her hand brushed mine, it was undeniable. When we landed in New York hours later, exhaustion weighed heavy on me, but so did something else, the knowledge that I couldn't keep running from what was building between us. As we stepped off the plane and into the terminal, Claire walked beside me in silence. Then, just before the customs line, she stopped. "You're going to have to decide," she said quietly, her eyes locking onto mine. "Are you going to keep pretending this is nothing, or are you going to let yourself feel it?" I opened my mouth to reply, but the words caught in my throat. She gave me a small, knowing smile, then turned and walked toward the exit with the rest of the crew. I stood frozen in place, my heart pounding louder than the noise of the crowd around me. Her ultimatum echoed in my mind, filling every corner of me with equal parts fear and longing. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The turbulence I feared wasn't in the sky. It was inside me, and there was no landing until I faced it. Our layover in New York stretched into 2 full days. For most crew members, it was a chance to rest, shop, or explore the city. For me, it was an impossible balancing act, staying close enough to Claire that I didn't seem distant, yet far enough away that I could keep pretending nothing was happening. Pretending was exhausting. The first morning, we walked together through Central Park, the autumn air crisp and biting. Yellow and orange leaves scattered across the paths, crunching beneath our shoes. She was animated, telling stories about her early days in the airline, laughing at the absurdities of life in the sky. I listened, caught between fascination and fear. The sunlight caught in her hair, and every time she tilted her head toward me, I felt something shift in my chest. Then, just as easily, reality intruded. At lunch, a group of crew members joined us at the cafe. Among them was Marcus, our senior purser. Known for his sharp instincts, Marcus had a way of picking up on unspoken things. He eyed Claire and me with a curiosity that felt sharper than casual. His lips curled into a smirk when he caught us exchanging one of those fleeting glances we thought we'd hidden well. Later, as we returned to the hotel, Marcus pulled me aside. "You know the rules," he said in a low tone, his eyes narrowing. "Crew relationships are frowned upon enough. But 2 women on the same team? Do you want to be the subject of gossip for the entire airline?" His words struck like a slap. I mumbled something about professionalism and hurried away, my cheeks burning. Fear rushed back in. Not just of my own feelings, but of being exposed, judged, ridiculed. That night, I tried to keep my distance from Claire. She noticed, of course. In the hotel lobby, she caught my arm, her eyes sharp. "What happened? You've been different since lunch." I hesitated, then told her about Marcus. Her jaw tightened, and her expression darkened. "So that's it? One man's opinion, and you're ready to hide again." "It's not that simple," I said, my voice trembling. "What if he reports us? What if people talk? We could lose everything." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "And what if we lose each other because you're too afraid to try?" Her words hit me harder than Marcus's warning. I looked at her, at the fierce determination in her eyes, and I felt my defenses crumbling. But before I could respond, a loud bang shook the lobby windows. Outside, chaos erupted. Sirens blared in the distance, and people screamed as a taxi collided with a delivery truck just down the street. Glass shattered, and the air filled with the acrid smell of burning rubber. Without thinking, Claire grabbed my hand and pulled me outside. The scene was a mess, 2 vehicles twisted together, smoke pouring from the hood of the taxi. A woman stumbled from the back seat, dazed and crying. Claire ran to her immediately, guiding her to safety while I rushed toward the driver, helping him out of the wreck. My adrenaline surged, pushing aside fear. We worked together wordlessly, like we had on flights countless times, but this was different. This was raw, dangerous, and real. When the firefighters arrived minutes later, we stepped back, hands still gripping each other's as if afraid to let go. My heart thundered in my chest, not just from the chaos but from the realization that, in the middle of disaster, the only person I trusted to stand beside me was Claire. Back inside the hotel, shaken and exhausted, we sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she broke it. "Do you see now? Life doesn't wait. It throws turbulence at you when you least expect it. And the only thing that makes it bearable is knowing who you want next to you." Her words shattered the last of my excuses. Tears stung my eyes, and I nodded, my voice barely steady. "I want you. I've been terrified, but I can't keep running." Claire's face softened, her hand sliding into mine. For the first time, there was no hesitation between us. The walls I had built came down with a single truth: I wanted her, consequences and all. But just as the moment swelled, Marcus appeared in the lobby again, his eyes narrowing at the sight of our joined hands. He didn't say anything, just watched with that knowing smirk, as if confirming his suspicions. My heart sank. Claire squeezed my hand, leaning closer. "Let him look. Let them all look. I'm not hiding anymore." Her defiance gave me strength, but the weight of what it meant pressed down on me. This was no longer just about feelings. It was about risk, reputation, and a choice I couldn't postpone any longer. As we rose to leave the lobby, Marcus's voice followed us, calm but cutting. "You're making a mistake," he said simply. Maybe he was right. Maybe this would cost us more than we could imagine. But as I stepped out into the cool New York night with Claire's hands still wrapped firmly around mine, I knew one thing for certain: the biggest mistake would be letting fear dictate what I felt. Still, as we walked in silence back to the hotel, my chest tightened with the question I didn't dare voice. How much were we about to lose for the chance to finally be honest? The morning after the accident, I woke to the faint hum of the city outside our hotel window and the echo of Marcus's voice still clawing at my thoughts. "You're making a mistake." The words repeated in my head like a warning siren. Claire knocked on my door before I had even managed to pull myself together. Her hair was tied back loosely, her face free of makeup, and yet she radiated the same intensity that had drawn me in from the start. "Breakfast?" she asked softly. I hesitated but nodded. We walked together to a quiet diner near Times Square. Between bites of pancakes and sips of coffee, she looked at me with eyes that demanded honesty. "So," she said, "are we going to keep pretending this is just friendship? Or are you ready to admit what's been happening between us?" I set my fork down, my heart pounding. The truth pressed against my chest like it had been waiting years to escape. "I don't want to hide anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "I want you, Claire. I've wanted you from the very first flight." Her lips curved into a small, relieved smile, but before we could savor the moment, Marcus walked into the diner. Of all the places, of all the times, he had chosen now. He spotted us immediately and walked over, his presence casting a heavy shadow on our fragile truth. "You two really don't care who sees, do you?" His tone dripped with judgment. Claire straightened in her seat. "No, Marcus. We don't. And if you have a problem with that, it's yours to carry, not ours." I froze. Her boldness both terrified and thrilled me. My pulse raced as I waited for his response. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Be careful. Airlines don't look kindly on crew scandals. Careers have ended for less." Then he walked away, leaving behind the bitter taste of his warning. I turned to Claire, panic rising again. What if he reports us? What if? She placed her hand over mine, grounding me. "Then we'll face it. Together." Her words felt like a lifeline. I squeezed her hand back, realizing that fear had kept me caged far too long. Love wasn't meant to be a prison. That night, on the flight back to Los Angeles, the tension reached its breaking point. We were assigned different sections of the plane, but the universe, or maybe fate, had other plans. Midway through the flight, turbulence shook the cabin violently. Passengers gasped, babies cried, and the air filled with unease. I hurried to help a nervous passenger when I felt Claire's presence behind me. She steadied a tray I nearly dropped, her hand brushing mine. The warmth of her touch steadied more than the tray. It steadied me. When the turbulence subsided, applause erupted from relieved passengers. And then, without planning it, without calculating the risks, I turned to Claire. Our eyes locked, and in front of rows of strangers, I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't long, just a fleeting press of lips, but it carried the weight of everything we had suppressed. Gasps rippled through the cabin, followed by murmurs. My heart pounded, but for the first time, I felt free. When we pulled apart, Claire's smile was radiant, fearless. "Now they all know," she said softly. The rest of the flight passed in a haze. Marcus avoided us, though I caught his disapproving glare more than once. But I didn't care anymore. The passengers had witnessed something real, and I couldn't take it back, and I didn't want to. After landing, as we walked through the terminal, Claire slipped her fingers through mine. The fluorescent lights above, the endless crowd rushing past, none of it mattered. What mattered was the certainty blooming in my chest. I loved her. Outside, under the night sky of Los Angeles, she turned to me. "We might face consequences," she said, her voice steady. "But at least we won't face them alone." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "I'd rather lose everything with you than live a lie without you." For a long moment, we just stood there, holding on to each other as though the world could crumble and we would still remain. I had entered this journey afraid of gossip, judgment, and consequences. But in the end, love had taught me that courage wasn't about avoiding turbulence. It was about choosing who you wanted in the seat beside you when the skies turned rough. And for me, that choice would always be Claire.